The day had a bad feel to it, oppressive, even out in the dusty openness of the Nevada desert. Maybe it was the experiment, the whispers I overheard from nervous-looking scientists, or the way the ground rumbled under my boots like a sleeping giant about to stir. Whatever it was, the bad vibes wouldn't leave my gut. I was part of Operation Gateway, a top-secret boondoggle aimed at, well, no one would tell us grunts what the brass had cooked up. Supposedly some kind of teleportation experiment, with me and a few of my boys from the 2nd Armored strapped into our Abrams tank as test subjects. The machine they built looked like something out of a 50s sci-fi flick, 2 massive rings of shimmering metal, hovering in the air with a swirling energy field crackling between them. They called it a temporal arch. We called it spooky as heck, the kind of thing you only volunteer for because it beats latrine duty or another round of desert maneuvers. Hey Carver. My gunner, Jenkins, tapped my shoulder, his voice a tense whisper. What do you reckon they're gonna do to us? I shrugged, watching the head scientist, a brainiac named Dr. Emerson, pace back and forth like an anxious squirrel. Beats me, Jenks. Maybe they'll make us disappear like some cheap magic trick. The air crackled, and an expectant hush fell over the gathered crowd. My stomach lurched as the energy swirling within the arch intensified, shifting from an almost pleasant hum to a high-pitched whine that made my teeth rattle. This was it. The moment those eggheads in their fancy lab coats had spent years toying with. Dr. Emerson raised a hand, his face pale but determined. Initiating sequence, he called out. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. With a flash of blinding light and a deafening roar, the temporal arch surged with power. The force of it yanked the Abrams forward like an unseen hand, and the world around us warped and twisted. My ears popped, my head spun, and my stomach threatened to revolt. The sensation was beyond nausea. It was like every part of me was being pulled in a dozen different directions. I squeezed my eyes shut against the disorienting swirl of colors and screamed. Or maybe that was Jenkins, or one of the other guys in the tank. Or all of us. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it was over. The screaming, the pressure, the sense of unmaking, it ebbed away, leaving only a ringing silence in its wake. Gingerly, I cracked an eyelid open. My heart pounded in my ears. We were still in the tank, that much was clear, but the world outside. Holy! Jenkins's voice held an awestruck tremor. Carver, look! Beyond the viewport, the baked Nevada sands had vanished. In their place sprawled an unfamiliar landscape, rolling green hills, clusters of boxy buildings that looked more like barns than anything modern. And people, clad in bronze and crimson tunics, wielding long spears and glinting shields. They were staring at us. We were staring back. Then the truth hit me, crashing in like a tidal wave. We'd traveled. But not across miles, not over the state lines. We were centuries, millennia, out of place. The rings, the arch, the whole blasted experiment, it was a freaking time machine. A wave of frantic muttering broke out inside the tank. Beside me, Jenkins looked ready to either chuck up his breakfast or pass out cold. Sarge. My loader, Stumpy Hernandez, began in a shaky voice, then trailed off as a collective shout drew our attention back to the world outside. Hundreds of these ancient warriors, bronze armor reflecting the fierce afternoon sun, were racing toward us. Their formation was disciplined, organized. This was no band of startled villagers. This was an army. Hostiles incoming. I almost didn't recognize my own voice, thick with a cold dread. There was no time for deliberation, no opportunity to radio our impossible situation back to the scientists. Our orders, ingrained through grueling drills, cut through the panic. Jenkins. Target that lead group, AP round, load. I barked. My gunner's hands flew across the control panel, muscles twitching as he acquired the target. Stumpy. Switch to thermal. Scan the perimeter. Locate the largest concentration of troops. The Abrams roared to life, its powerful engine drowning out the shouts outside. I swiveled the turret, the long gun barrel tracking the oncoming wave of ancient warriors. My throat closed up, a mix of absurdity and a raw, desperate instinct for survival warring within me. Jenkins's voice cut through the tense silence inside the tank. Target locked. There was no hesitation. We had no choice. Fire. The tank shuddered as the cannon boomed, spewing a searing jet of fire and metal. The blast ripped through the lead group of charging warriors, scattering bodies like broken toys. The air filled with a choking stench, and somewhere in the back of my mind, the absurdity of the situation threatened to crack my soldier composure. We'd just slaughtered men from another era. But out there, ancient or not, they were still trying to kill us. Stumpy's panicked voice filtered through the comm system. Sarge. Hundreds of 'em flanking left. Oh man, they're everywhere. My mind raced. We were monstrously outmatched. We were in hostile, unknown territory, our supplies limited. Our best bet was brute force, shock and awe, and maybe, just maybe, these ancient warriors would break and scatter in the face of our unstoppable firepower. Jenkins. Cycle through those groups, fragmentation rounds. Suppress. Stumpy, locate their leadership. If we can take out there, maybe the rest will falter. The tank became a whirlwind of controlled chaos, the stench of gunpowder stinging my nostrils, my senses overwhelmed by the sights and sounds of anachronistic carnage swirling around us. Jenkins' fire hammered the groups of stunned soldiers, and Stumpy's frantic updates on enemy formations kept my turret swiveling, the cannon barking its terrible song. Yet for every group that scattered, another two seemed to take their place. They brandished swords and slings, arrows bouncing harmlessly off the Abrams armor like rain against metal. Then, amidst the fray, I spotted it. A raised platform of polished wood, a figure draped in flowing crimson robes, gesturing wildly towards us. Beside him stood the largest warriors I'd seen, their faces contorted in battle fury beneath ornate bronze helmets. The leaders. Hit that platform, Jenks. Highest explosive you got. The order came out rougher than I intended. My pulse thrummed a discordant beat against my ribs. Jenkins slammed and he rounded into the chamber, his aim fast and true. The blast shredded the makeshift command post, sending splinters of wood and mangled bodies flying. For a brief, hope-filled moment, a ripple of confusion surged through the enemy ranks. But it wouldn't last. From somewhere in the chaos, a deep, booming sound carried over the din, a horn blast, clear and strong. It galvanized the warriors, who let out a unified roar that drowned out even the thunder of our main gun. Their hesitation vanished, replaced by a single-minded fury. This wasn't just a battle. This was a blood vendetta. Their attack intensified. Archers filled the sky with a darkening cloud of arrows. Soldiers clambered onto the tank, attempting to pry open hatches, jabbing spears through viewports. Some even started stacking logs and stones around the treads, aiming to immobilize us. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was becoming a desperate fight for our very lives. We're bogging down, Sarge. Stumpy's voice was strained. They're under us, the treads are starting to lock up. Fear, cold and sharp, iced through my veins. We'd become a metal behemoth, cornered by an angry swarm. Ammo was running low, and even if we somehow beat back this wave, what about the next? And the next? Eventually, they'd overwhelm us, or we'd run out of shells to fire. It was only a matter of time. Then, a glimmer of an idea sparked in the haze of adrenaline and dread, a crazy, foolhardy, maybe even brilliant idea. Listen up, I shouted into the comm, my tone slicing through the panic. This is what we're gonna do. The plan was, objectively, reckless, borderline insane. It relied on gambles, guesswork, and a whole lot of luck. But with our ammo dwindling and fatigue setting in, desperation had us by the throat. Jenkins. Target the densest cluster of 'em you can find, then switch to smoke. I barked, explaining my mad scheme over the roar of the engine and the dull thud of arrows against our armor. Jenkins nodded, his brow furrowed in a mixture of fear and steely determination. With practiced efficiency, he fired and he rounded into the frenzied mob of warriors, clearing a temporary path. Then his hands danced across the controls, and the Abrams belched a thick, choking cloud of obscuring smoke. Stumpy, floor it. Hard east. The whine of the treads protesting against the weight of the tank filled the enclosed space as the Abrams lurched forward, breaking free of the immobilizing swarm. We plowed through the smoke, the ancient warriors temporarily blinded and confused. For a few precious moments, we had the element of surprise back. The plan hinged entirely on the direction I'd chosen. My gamble was this: if we were lucky, if my jumbled assumptions about ancient civilizations held true, then somewhere to the east, lay the sea. Stumpy. Scan for large bodies of water. We need to find the coast, I shouted over the comm system, my voice a strained rasp in the air stale with cordite. My loader fumbled with the thermal imager, his normally steady hands trembling. Nothing yet, Sarge. Just more hills, more of them. My teeth clenched. The ancient warriors were recovering from the smoke tactic, their enraged shouts carrying on the wind as they scrambled in pursuit. To be caught between a rock and a hard place out here in the open was a surefire way to end up as a bloody asterisk in a history textbook no one would ever write. I forced myself to think, filtering out the sounds of battle, the numbing dread coiling in my gut. Seafaring peoples often settled near coasts. If these ancient warriors truly belonged to a great civilization like Sparta, as a quick history lesson dredged up from the back of my mind suggested, their homeland wouldn't be too far from the water. It was a flimsy line of reasoning, but all we had. "Jenkins, give 'em another taste of sunshine." The main gun roared, the concussive blast carving a swathe of devastation in the ranks of our pursuers. It bought us a little more time, but with every expended round, the reality of our limited supplies bore down on my shoulders. Finally, a flicker on the thermal display caught Stumpy's eye. "Sarge. Something big. Reflecting different temperature readings. Wait, yes. I think it's water. A huge body of water." A surge of adrenaline washed over me, momentarily eclipsing the gut-churning fear. He'd found it. Or at least, something close enough that could pass as a coastline. "Keep your eyes on it. Lead us there, Stumpy," I commanded, hope blooming cautiously in my chest. We barreled down a long slope, the Abrams lurching and bouncing as we finally broke free of the rolling hills. Relief flooded my veins as a vast expanse of blue shimmered in the distance, a sea, or perhaps a great lake. Either way, it was our ticket out of this mess. Then, as we neared the coast, the ground gave way to a swathe of golden sand, and a sight that stole the breath from my lungs unfolded before us. Hundreds of ships lined the shore. Sleek vessels with curved bows and single, massive sails, they bobbed gently in the shallows like a flock of strange, oversized birds. But more chilling were the thousands of figures swarming the beach, more warriors, clad in familiar bronze armor, their spears glittering beneath the harsh sun. We'd rolled straight from a frying pan and into a raging inferno. Oh man, Stumpy muttered, a note of despair creeping into his voice. He wasn't wrong. This was beyond hopeless. A terrible realization struck me. If these were the Spartans, famed for their naval prowess and iron discipline, well, we'd crashed headfirst into the staging ground for an invasion force. This was their army readying to set sail, and we were an unwelcome, inexplicable anomaly dropped into their midst. A renewed wave of shouts echoed across the beach as the massed Spartan warriors spotted our approaching tank, their disciplined formations rippling in surprise and confusion. Yet, they didn't attack. Instead, a pathway opened up among the troops, and a figure strode forth. The man radiated an aura of seasoned command, even through tattered linen robes. A spear was strapped to his back, and his stern face, tanned and lined from years under the sun, was framed by a scraggly beard. His gaze fixed on the Abrams, a flicker of curiosity warring with cold calculation in his dark eyes. "Jenkins, cease fire." "Stumpy, shut down the engine," I ordered, though every fiber of my being screamed against surrender. My voice sounded hoarse, a tired echo of the barking sergeant I'd been mere hours ago. We rolled to a stop amidst a sea of bronze and wary stares, the silence broken only by the soft lap of waves against the shore. The Abrams, with its smoking gun and dented armor, must have looked like a monstrous, mythological beast to them, spat from the belly of the underworld. Slowly, I unlatched the commander's hatch. The humid sea air washed over me, carrying the tang of salt and the underlying scent of thousands of unwashed bodies. I climbed out, blinking in the harsh sunlight, trying to project an air of calm despite the rapid pulse pounding at my temples. The Spartan leader halted several paces away, his hand resting on the hilt of a wickedly curved sword sheathed at his waist. There was a long, tense moment, the kind where the weight of history hangs heavy in the space between men. Finally, he spoke. His voice was strong and clear, with an odd, lilting accent I couldn't place. "Who are you, creature of metal and smoke? From where do you hail?" "My name is Sergeant Carver," I said steadily, though the title felt laughably inadequate in the face of this impossible situation. We come from a land far away." It was the understatement of the millennium. The Spartan leader frowned, tilting his head. "Your words are like riddles. Explain yourself, creature, or face the wrath of Sparta." Choosing my words carefully, I continued. "Our land is a place of powerful machines and great towers that pierce the sky. We came here not by choice, but by..." I faltered, scrambling for a word these ancients could even begin to comprehend. "By a twist of fate." The Spartan leader surveyed me, skepticism etched on his sunburned face. I couldn't blame him. To him, we must have looked like demons dragged forth from some terrifying myth. Inspiration struck. "Our weapon," I gestured towards the Abrams, "you saw its power. It's a taste of what our land has wrought." It was vague, threatening, and exactly what I needed it to be. The flicker of interest in the Spartan's eyes intensified, turning into a shrewd glint. He glanced back at his assembled army, their weapons held at the ready, then returned his gaze to me. "You come from a land of might and marvels," he conceded slowly, his voice thoughtful. "Your arrival was foretold, though not in this vessel of iron." Prophecies. My mind raced. Had something in the temporal shift alerted them? Some distortion they interpreted as a divine sign? "Sparta faces a grave enemy," he continued, his finger tracing an invisible line across the distant horizon. "Persia, vast and greedy, they seek to yoke us under their rule. Perhaps your arrival is a sign from the gods, an offering of power to aid us." The Spartan leader held my gaze, his eyes burning with a mix of cunning and a strange desperation. Fate had handed us the wildest lifeline I could imagine, the kind that made the time travel incident pale in comparison. We, accidental interdimensional intruders, could become the linchpin in one of history's most iconic clashes. The weight of the Spartans' proposal hung between us like a hawk circling its prey. To become embroiled in the ancient world's power struggles, to rewrite the course of history, the idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. But what choice did we have? Stranded in the past, facing a hostile army, our best hope for survival lay in joining forces with these legendary warriors. I met the Spartan's gaze, steeling my resolve. "We bring a power unlike any you've seen," I said, projecting every ounce of authority I could muster. "With it, we could help you crush Persia, on one condition." The leader's brows raised, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "And what condition would that be, creature of iron?" "Our freedom," I stated firmly, ignoring the nervous hitch in Jenkins's breath behind me. "Once the Persians are broken, we want a way out of here. A way back to our own time." The Spartan remained silent for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then, a slow smile spread across his lips, a smile devoid of warmth but filled with a warrior's respect for audacity. "Well met, Sergeant Carver. It seems we share a common need. Sparta craves victory, and you, a way home. A bargain then. Show me the might of your metal beast, and we shall speak of prophecies and Persians." With a gesture, he summoned several warriors, who warily approached the Abrams. I signaled to Jenkins and Stumpy, and together, we unsealed the heavy hatches, welcoming the curious Spartans inside. Jenkins, ever the eager soldier, took up the role of tour guide, explaining the basics of the tank's workings with a mix of sign language and gruff demonstrations. The interior of the Abrams was a cramped maze of machinery and spent shell casings, reeking of oil and sweat. The Spartans marveled at the gunner's seat, the intricate controls, and the viewports providing a distorted glimpse of the world outside. They ran calloused fingers along the cold, smooth metal, their eyes alight with a mixture of awe and trepidation. Their leader, whose name I learned was Leonidas, watched their reactions with stoic interest, peppering me with questions about the Abrams' destructive capabilities. When I finished, he nodded grimly. "It is as I suspected," Leonidas mused, "this tank, it is a war machine beyond anything our world has ever seen." It was my turn to guide them outside. The Spartans, initially hesitant, gathered in a wide arc in front of the tank, the setting sun casting long shadows across the golden sand. "Behold," I announced, my voice echoing across the beach. "The power of our land." I climbed back into the commander's cupola, barking orders with renewed urgency. From his position, Jenkins targeted a cluster of driftwood half buried in the sand. With a deafening roar, the main gun spat fire. The blast vaporized the target, sending splinters and sand flying in a spectacular display of sheer force. Gasps and startled cries rippled through the crowd of Spartans. Warriors flinched, some shielding their eyes against the spray of debris. For the first time, I saw genuine fear mirrored in their proud faces. The power we wielded, so commonplace, so terrifyingly destructive in our own era, struck them to the core. Yet, Leonidas, the seasoned commander, did not recoil. As the dust settled, his eyes blazed not with fear, but with a calculating hunger. He saw in the smoking remnants on the beach not just a weapon, but a pathway to salvation for his homeland, a means to defy the insatiable empire of Persia. "This changes everything," he declared, his voice thick with a strange mix of wonder and ruthless determination. As the last rays of sunlight bled into the sea, the Spartans looked at us with changed eyes. We were no longer oddities, anomalies to be feared and fended off. With that single demonstration, we had become potential saviors, harbingers of victory. And pawns in a game far larger and older than we'd ever imagined. A pact was forged that day, an alliance born of desperation and the tantalizing promise of impossible triumphs. We, the accidental voyagers from a distant future, had been thrust into the crucible of ancient warfare. The Spartans, renowned for their ferocity and unyielding spirit, had just gained an ace no army in existence could hope to counter. And so, it began. Days filled with grueling training as we taught the Spartans the rudimentary workings of the Abrams and the basics of its destructive capabilities. Nights spent under the unfamiliar blaze of stars, listening to tales of Persian might and Spartan valor. We learned their customs, their pride, even the harsh cadence of their language. In turn, they began to fathom the strange power housed within our metal beast. Fear gave way to grim fascination, then to a hardened respect. These warriors of legend understood, with chilling clarity, the sheer potential of this alliance. With our otherworldly weapon, and their unyielding spirit, they saw a chance to achieve what once seemed impossible, to stand unbowed against the might of an empire, to protect their homeland from becoming another jewel in the Persian crown. We, in turn, began to see beyond the bronze armor and the unfamiliar helmets. We saw Leonidas, a king burdened by duty, his eyes haunted by visions of a Persian yoke upon his people. We saw Dionysus, a veteran warrior with a booming laugh that could turn to chilling resolve in a heartbeat. We even saw Astenois, a young scout with a shy smile and an archer's unwavering aim. They became more than allies. They became our lifeline in a world wholly foreign, a bond forged in the desperation of exile and honed on the whetstone of a shared goal. Then came the day we marched out to meet the enemy. An army of Spartans rippled across the dusty plains, spears held high, the Abrams at the vanguard of their formation like an armored leviathan from the depths of the sea. It was a sight both awe-inspiring and utterly absurd. History swirled around us in a maelstrom, poised to change its course irrevocably. It was on that battlefield, as the Persian hordes surged forward with their terrifying numbers, their arrows darkening the sky, that the true test of our alliance came. The clash was apocalyptic, a thunderous symphony of steel and screams. Each blast from the tank shattered the enemy ranks, and Leonidas' fierce command cut through the chaos. The Spartans fought with newfound ferocity, driven by a desperation born from both duty and the glimpse of an improbable victory shimmering before them. Yet, the Persians seemed endless, their overwhelming numbers slowly wearing away at even the most valiant resistance. It became a fight not just for glory, but for survival, and somewhere in the swirling madness, I realized we'd become something entirely new. We were no longer just soldiers out of time, we were history in the making, our choices reverberating across epochs. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the battlefield in hues of blood and flame, a question lingered in the smoky air: would our gamble pay off? Would we alter the annals of time and reshape this ancient world, or would we be swallowed by the ever-churning tides of history, becoming mere footnotes in wars not our own? Only the coming dawn held the answer, its first rays promising either the triumph of the impossible or a grim testament to the price of meddling in powers beyond our understanding.